Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Secure ASP.NET Web API with API Key Authentication, a comprehensive tutorial. This tutorial provides a detailed guide on implementing API Key Authentication in your ASP.NET Web API application. We'll cover the concepts, benefits, step-by-step implementation, and best practices, including code examples. Understanding API Key Authentication. API Key Authentication is a simple and widely used method for controlling access to your web API resources. It involves issuing unique alphanumeric strings, API keys, to clients who wish to consume your API. When a client makes a request to your API, they include the API key in the request header or query string. The API then validates the provided key against a store of valid keys. If the key is valid, the request is processed, otherwise, it's rejected with an appropriate error. Benefits of API Key Authentication **** simplicity *** relatively easy to implement and manage compared to more complex authentication mechanisms like OAuth or JWT. ** control over access ** you can control which clients have access to your API and what level of access they have by assigning different keys. * usage tracking * you can track API usage based on the API key to monitor performance and identify potential abuse. * basic security layer * provides a basic level of protection against unauthorized access, especially when combined with HTTPS. Limitations ** less secure than OAuth/JWT for complex scenarios ** API keys are long-lived and can be compromised if not handled properly. OAuth/JWT offer better security features like short-lived tokens and delegation. * key management overhead * managing API keys, generation, storage, revocation, can become challenging as the number of clients grows. * not suitable for end-user authentication * API keys are generally used for authenticating applications, not individual users. 2. Implementation steps. Here's a step-by-step guide on implementing API Key Authentication in your ASP.NET Web API application. 1. Project Setup. Create a new ASP.NET Web API project in Visual Studio. Choose either .NET Framework or .NET Core. For this example, we will use .NET 6, as it is the most recent stable version at the time of writing. * create a new ASP.NET Core Web API project * 1. Open Visual Studio and select Create a new project. 2. Choose ASP.NET Core Web API and click Next. 3. Name your project, example API Key Auth example, and click Next. 4. Select .NET 6, long-term support, and ensure that Enable Open API support is checked. Click Create. * install necessary packages, optional. While not strictly required, consider installing Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication. It provides useful base classes and extension methods for building authentication handlers. 2. Create an API key storage mechanism. You'll need a way to store and retrieve API keys. For simplicity, this example will use an in-memory dictionary. In a real-world application, you'd typically use a database, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MongoDB, etc. Explanation **** IAPI Key Repository ** defines an interface for interacting with the API key storage. This allows you to swap out the in-memory implementation with a database-backed one later. In-memory API Key Repository ** a concrete implementation of IAPI Key Repository that stores API keys in a dictionary. The dictionary maps API keys, strings, to owners, also strings. This is a simplified example. In a real application, you would typically store more information about each API key, example permissions, creation date, expiration date. Asterisk is valid API key async asterisk checks if a given API key exists in the dictionary. Asterisk get API key owner async asterisk retrieves the owner, client, associated with a given API key. 3. Create an API key authentication handler. Create a custom authentication handler that validates API keys. This handler is responsible for extracting the API key from the request, validating it against your storage, and creating a claims principal if the key is valid. Explanation asterisk. Asterisk API key authentication handler asterisk this class inherits from authentication handler API key authentication options and implements the logic for API key authentication. Asterisk API key header name asterisk a constant defining the HTTP header where the API key is expected. You can customize this. Asterisk constructor asterisk the constructor takes the standard dependencies for an authentication handler, including an IAPI key repository instance for accessing API key data. It also ensures that the repository is properly injected. Asterisk handle authenticate async asterisk this is the core method. It performs the following steps. 1. Extract API key asterisk tries to extract the API key from the XAPI key header. If the header is missing or empty, it returns a fail result. 2. Validate API key asterisk calls underscore API key repository dot is valid API key async to check if the extracted API key is valid. If not, it returns a fail result. 3. Create claims principal asterisk if the API key is valid, it retrieves the owner of the API key using underscore API key repository dot get API key owner async. It then creates a claims principal with claims that represent the authenticated user, in this case, the client associated with the API key. The claim types.name is used to store the owner of the API key. You can add additional claims if needed, example roles, permissions. The authentication scheme is set to scheme.name, which will be API key as defined in your options. 4. Return success asterisk if all steps are successful, it creates an authentication ticket containing the claims principal and returns a success result. 4. API key authentication options. 5. Extension method to add the API key authentication. 6. Configure authentication in program.cs, or startup.cs for .NET Framework. Configure the authentication middleware in your application's program.cs, or startup.cs for .NET Framework. This involves registering the API key authentication scheme and specifying which endpoints require authentication. Explanation asterisk. Asterisk register IAPI key repository asterisk registers the in-memory API key repository, or your database-backed implementation, with the dependency injection container. This makes it available to the API key authentication handler. Asterisk configure authentication asterisk. Asterisk add authentication, configures the authentication middleware. It sets the default authenticate scheme and default challenge scheme to API key authentication options.default scheme. This tells the application to use the API key authentication scheme by default when authenticating requests. Asterisk add API key auth. This extension method registers the API key authentication handler with the authentication builder. The options parameter can be used to configure the handler's behavior. Example, set the realm for the www authenticate header. Asterisk add authorization asterisk adds the authorization middleware, which is used to enforce access control based on claims and roles. Asterisk use authentication, and use authorization, Asterisk these lines are critical. They add the authentication and authorization middleware to the HTTP request pipeline. Make sure to call use authentication before use authorization. The order is important. 7. Protect your API endpoints. Use the authorize attribute to protect your API endpoints. This attribute tells ASP.NET Core to require authentication for accessing the endpoint. Explanation asterisk. Asterisk authorize attribute asterisk applying the authorize attribute to the weather forecast controller class means that all actions within that controller require authentication. Clients must provide a valid API key to access any of these endpoints. Asterisk authorize, policy equals admin, attribute asterisk you can also use the authorize attribute to require a specific policy. In this example, only users fulfilling the admin policy are authorized. Policies need to be configured in the application. 8. Implement authorization policy, optional. Create a new policy requires the following. 1. Create a new requirement. 2. Create a handler for the requirement. 3. Register the handler. Register the policy in program.cs. 9. Testing the API. Use a tool like Postman, Swagger, or curl to test your API. Asterisk successful request asterisk. Send a request to one of the protected endpoints, example /weather forecast, and include the XAPI key header with a valid API key, example validAPI 123. You should receive a successful response, status code 200 OK, with the weather forecast data. Asterisk failed request, missing API key. Send a request to the same endpoint without the XAPI key header. You should receive an HTTP 401 unauthorized response. Asterisk failed request, invalid API key. Send a request to the endpoint with an invalid API key, example XAPI key, invalid key. You should also receive an HTTP 401 unauthorized response. 3. Best practices and considerations. Asterisk use HTTPS asterisk always use HTTPS to encrypt the communication between the client and your API. This prevents API keys from being intercepted in transit. Asterisk secure storage asterisk never store API keys in plain text. Hash and salt them before storing them in your database or configuration file. Consider using a dedicated secret management solution, example Azure Key Vault, HashiCorp Vault, for storing sensitive information like API keys. Asterisk API key rotation asterisk implement a mechanism for rotating API keys periodically. This reduces the risk of compromised keys being used indefinitely. Asterisk API key revocation asterisk provide a way to revoke API keys if they are compromised or no longer needed. Asterisk rate limiting asterisk implement rate limiting to prevent abuse and protect your API from being overwhelmed by excessive requests. Asterisk logging and monitoring asterisk log API key usage to track performance, identify potential issues, and detect suspicious activity. Asterisk consider other authentication methods asterisk API keys are a good starting point, but for more complex scenarios, especially those involving end-user authentication, consider using more robust authentication mechanisms like OAuth 2.0 or JWT. Asterisk educate developers asterisk clearly document how to use API key authentication for developers consuming your API. Asterisk handle API key generation asterisk implement a secure and controlled process for generating and issuing API keys. Asterisk separate concerns asterisk the authentication handler should only be concerned with validating the API key and constructing the claims principal. It should not be responsible for managing the API key repository or any other business logic. This principle makes the code more maintainable and testable. Idempotency *, make sure API key is idempotent. This ensures that the same result occurs regardless of how many times the API is hit. Input validation * validate the API key to prevent invalid formats or characters, and sanitize against injection attacks. 4. Advanced topics, beyond the scope of this tutorial. API key permissions * store more information about each API key, such as the specific resources they have access to. Use this information in your authorization logic to control access to different parts of your API. API key tiers * offer different tiers of API access based on the API key used, example free tier with limited requests, paid tier with higher limits. Integration with identity providers * integrate API key authentication with existing identity providers, example Azure Active Directory, for centralized authentication and authorization management. Key vaults for secret storage * use secure key vaults to store sensitive API keys, reducing the risk of exposure. Conclusion. API key authentication is a simple and effective way to protect your ASP.NET Web API. By following these steps and best practices, you can implement a secure and manageable API key authentication system. Remember to carefully consider your security requirements and choose the authentication method that best fits your needs. Don't hesitate to explore more advanced authentication mechanisms like OAuth/JWT as your API evolves and security requirements become more complex. Always prioritize security best practices and stay informed about the latest threats and vulnerabilities.